In the mid-17th century, the North Sea became a chessboard for empires. The great naval powers of England and the Dutch Republic, once allies, were now bitter rivals, their ambitions clashing over global trade routes and maritime dominance. The First Anglo-Dutch War had ended in a tense stalemate, but peace was fragile. By 1665, the drums of war beat once more. This time, it would be different. This was not just another trade dispute. It was a contest of philosophies, a clash of systems played out upon the waves. As the spring of 1665 arrived, the great ports of England and the Netherlands stirred with purpose. From the River Medway, a forest of masts and rigging began to move the Royal Navy, reborn under the restored monarchy. These were not just ships, they were instruments of a new doctrine. Long, disciplined lines of vessels sailed out into the English Channel, a display of raw power and meticulous order. On every quarterdeck, officers relayed commands with military precision, signal flags climbing the masts in a silent, rigid language. Their confidence was absolute. They sailed with the conviction that war at sea could be mastered through discipline and overwhelming force. Across the water, the Dutch harbors of Amsterdam and Rotterdam buzzed with a different kind of energy. The Dutch fleet put to sea not as a single, monolithic weapon, but as a swarm of seasoned veterans. Their ships, a mix of dedicated warships and powerful armed merchantmen, were commanded by captains who had spent their lives on the ocean. They were masters of wind and tide, their experience a form of instinct. Both fleets sailed with confidence, but they did not sail with the same philosophy. The war was beginning not with the roar of cannon, but with the quiet, deliberate unfurling of sails and the steady movement of two opposing ideas toward an inevitable collision. To understand the conflict to come, you must first understand the two machines of war now converging on the North Sea. The English fleet was a testament to centralized power and the emerging science of naval warfare. For King Charles II and his brother James, Duke of York, the Navy was an extension of the state's authority. Their strategy was built around the ship-of-the-line massive, floating fortresses designed for one purpose: to deliver devastating, coordinated broadsides. The English doctrine emphasized the rigid line of battle. Ships were to maintain a strict, unwavering formation, sailing one behind the other to create a continuous wall of cannon. This tactic maximized firepower and simplified command. A single set of signals from the flagship could direct the entire fleet as one entity. Discipline was paramount. Gunners drilled relentlessly, aiming to achieve a rate of fire that would shatter enemy hulls and morale before any complex maneuvering could take place. The English believed that victory was a matter of brute force, correctly applied. Their fleet was forged to fight as a single, crushing weapon. The Dutch approach was fundamentally different, shaped by a century of global trade and a republican spirit. The Navy was not the project of a king, but a confederation of 5 separate admiralties, each with its own traditions and resources. This created a system that was inherently decentralized. Dutch captains were renowned for their seamanship and individual initiative. They were expected to be traders, explorers, and fighters all at once. Their tactics reflected this flexibility. While they understood the value of the battle line, they were far more willing to break formation to exploit a weakness or gain a local advantage. The Dutch fleet was a collection of sharp, deadly blades, each wielded by an expert. Their commanders often relied on visual cues and a shared understanding developed over years of sailing together rather than a strict, top-down command structure. They were masters of the Mali the chaotic, close-quarters brawl where individual skill and aggression could turn the tide. Theirs was a fleet built on experience, adaptation, and the belief that the cleverest sailor, not just the biggest ship, would win the day. Order versus flexibility, doctrine versus instinct. To systems, to philosophies, sailing towards each other. For weeks, the fleets shadowed each other, a tense ballet of intimidation and posturing. They were vast cities on the water, each comprising over 100 ships and tens of thousands of men. The air was thick with the smell of tar, salt, and suspense. Lookouts strained their eyes, scanning the horizon for the first sign of the enemy's main body. The initial skirmishes were probes, tests of strength and resolve. But the time for maneuvering was coming to an end. The political will for a decisive battle had hardened in both London and The Hague. This was no longer a war of trade disruption. It was a war for naval supremacy. Then, on a clear June morning, it happened. The main English fleet, under the command of the Duke of York himself, sighted the full Dutch fleet, led by the experienced Lieutenant Admiral Jacob van Wassenaar-Abdam. The horizon, once empty, was now crowded with sails. The moment of truth had arrived. On both flagships, a flurry of activity erupted. Signal flags shot up the masts, carrying complex orders across miles of open water. Form line of battle. Prepare for engagement. On decks across the two fleets, the transformation was immediate and dramatic. Gun crews cast loose their heavy cannons, running them out of the gun ports with a deafening rumble. Marines climbed into the rigging, muskets in hand, while surgeons laid out their terrifying tools in the dark confines of the orlop deck. The rhythmic beat of the ship's drum echoed across the water, a steady heartbeat counting down to violence. As the two massive lines of ships began to align, parallel to each other, the strategic calculus shifted. Retreat was no longer an option. The choice to fight had been made. The wind, impartial and constant, filled the sails of both English and Dutch ships, pushing them closer. The sea itself seemed to hold its breath. On one side, a rigid line of floating batteries, a testament to order and firepower, ready to unleash a synchronized storm of iron. On the other, a more fluid formation of veteran seawolves, their instincts honed by a lifetime at sea, ready to adapt and strike. Both sides believed their system was superior. Both were convinced that their philosophy of war would prevail. Only the unforgiving sea would decide who was right. The cannons were aimed. The fuses were lit. The Second Anglo-Dutch War had truly begun. Thank you for watching. If you found this glimpse into naval history interesting, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the conflicts that shaped our world. We'll see you next time.